Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Russia says it detained 8 people linked to Saturday's blast on a key bridge connecting Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. Russia's accused Ukraine's military intelligence service of orchestrating the explosion, though Kyiv has not claimed responsibility. The blast sparked deadly retaliatory attacks across Ukraine, killing at least 20 people. The barrage of missiles came under the command of Kremlin's newly appointed head of military operations in Ukraine, Sergei Surovikin. Surovikin has been dubbed General Armageddon. He oversaw the mass destruction of civilian infrastructure in Syria as part of Russia's war efforts there. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's appealed to members of the G7 to boost Ukraine's air defenses to counter Russian attacks and called for new sanctions on Moscow.
For this new wave of terror, there must be a new wave of accountability for Russia, new sanctions, new forms of political pressure, and new forms of support for Ukraine.
The White House said Tuesday President Biden would reevaluate the U.S.'s relationship with Saudi Arabia following OPEC's recent announcement it would cut oil production by 2 million barrels a day, boosting the cost of gas and providing a boon to Russia amidst its invasion of Ukraine. On Monday, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez called for a freeze on cooperation with Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Senator Richard Blumenthal and Congressmember Ro Khanna announced a bill to block all U.S. weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. Congressmember Khanna tweeted, "Their brutal war in Yemen and their fleecing of American consumers at the pump must have consequences," he said. President Biden addressed the issue on CNN last night.
When this House and Senate gets back, they're going to have to. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with Russia.
What kind of consequences? Menendez says suspend all arms sales. Is that something you'd consider?
I'm not going to get into what I'd consider and what I have in mind.
President Biden was speaking to CNN's Jake Tapper. Meanwhile, United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan had talks with Vladimir Putin Tuesday in St. Petersburg, Russia. Israel and Lebanon have reached a deal over a long-disputed maritime border. The U.S. brokered deal could pave the way for Israel to extract and export gas to Europe as the continent grapples with a worsening energy crisis amidst Russia's war in Ukraine. The deal still must be signed by the two countries' leaders. In Iran, anti-government protests are in their 4th week, sparked last month by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini while in the custody of Iran's so-called morality police. On Monday, oil workers went on strike in support of the protests. Meanwhile, the death of 16-year-old Nika Shakarami has ignited more public rage. The girl's family says she disappeared after being chased by security forces for burning her headscarf during a protest and was found 10 days later in a mortuary. This comes as human rights groups warn of the deadly crackdown on protesters. In Iran's Kurdistan province, one group says at least 32 people in the region have been killed, another 1,500 injured, and thousands arrested. President Biden has called for the resignation of the 3 beleaguered L.A. City Council members who were caught on tape making racist comments. The audio was recorded last year and recently leaked. It featured Council members Nury Martinez, Gil Cedillo, and Kevin DeLeon making racist remarks about Indigenous and Black people in Los Angeles. Nury Martinez, who referred to the black son of a white city council member as a little monkey, saying it in Spanish, announced yesterday she's taking a leave of absence from her city council seat. She already resigned as city council president. On Tuesday, scores of protesters gathered outside L.A. City Hall and packed the council chamber demanding resignations.
We're the most marginalized community in the city. So I'm gonna tell y'all this. I challenge all of you on the city council. Y'all need to address anti-black racism. And if you don't, we will. You have 2 choices. Be on the right side of history or be on the wrong side of history. Thank you. Thank you.
President Biden is in Los Angeles today. In Texas, the police officer who shot 17-year-old Eric Cantu as he was eating in a McDonald's parking lot last week has turned himself in to face aggravated assault charges. James Brennan opened fire on the teen moments after opening the driver's side door, even though Cantu posed no risk, was unarmed and eating with a friend. Cantu remains hospitalized in critical condition. Brennan's arrest comes just days after he was fired from the San Antonio Police Department over the shooting. In more news from Texas, a Baytown police officer was acquitted in a 2019 fatal shooting of Pamela Turner. Juan de la Cruz was on trial for aggravated assault for shooting Turner, a 44-year-old black woman and grandmother, 5 times in an apartment complex while trying to arrest her in May of 2019. Turner's family says she was having a mental health crisis, that de la Cruz knew Turner had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Turner and de la Cruz lived in the same apartment complex where de la Cruz also served as a security guard. Prosecutors in Baltimore have dropped the charges against Adnan Syed, asserting he was wrongly convicted weeks after he was released from prison and had his murder conviction overturned. Syed spent 23 years in prison after being convicted of the 1999 murder of his ex-girlfriend, Heyman Lee. The case gained national attention in 2014 when it was featured on the hugely popular podcast Serial. In Florida, jurors begin deliberations today to determine the fate of Parkland mass shooter Nikolas Cruz, who killed 17 people at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in 2018. Cruz could face the death penalty. This is lead prosecutor Michael Sanz delivering closing arguments to the jury Tuesday.
We picked Valentine's Day to do it while school was in session. And you could tell by the evidence and the testimony you've been sitting here and listening to everything, this plan was goal-directed, it was calculated, it was purposeful, and it was a systematic massacre.
Florida prosecutor Michael Sanz. The Justice Department has asked the Supreme Court to reject Donald Trump's request to allow a special master to review classified documents seized by the FBI from his Mar-a-Lago estate in August. The Department of Justice argued Trump has no plausible claims of ownership over the materials and that a review by the special master could imperil national security. In other news from the Supreme Court, justices Tuesday declined to review a case that would determine whether a fetus has constitutional rights. The so-called fetal personhood case was brought by a Catholic group and 2 pregnant women who were seeking to sue on behalf of the women's fetuses. In another case Tuesday, the Supreme Court reversed a lower court ruling which allowed for the counting of undated mail-in ballots in a Pennsylvania election for county judge. The decision will not reverse the results of the 2021 judicial election, which was won by Democrat Zachary Cohen, but could prove significant in future challenges related to undated ballots. The Labor Department has proposed a new rule that could prevent companies like Lyft and Uber from misclassifying workers as independent contractors and deny them essential rights and benefits. The Labor Department said, quote, "Misclassification is a serious issue that denies workers' rights and protections under federal labor standards, promotes wage theft, allows certain employers to gain an unfair advantage over law-abiding businesses, and hurts the economy at large." A massive leak of over 4 million confidential documents from the Mexican government has revealed Mexico's military sold hand grenades and tactical equipment to drug cartels. Mexico's Ministry of National Defense was targeted by a group of hackers known as Guacamaya. The leak is one of the biggest in Mexico's history. Documents also show Mexican officials monitored journalists using the Israeli Pegasus spyware and evaded cooperation with the investigation into the disappearance of 43 students from Ayotzinapa. The Zapatistas are also one of the most heavily surveilled resistance groups in Mexico. We'll have more on the Guacamaya leaks later in the broadcast. And actor Angela Lansbury has died at the age of 96. She's best known for her role in the TV series Murder, She Wrote and appeared in the 1962 film The Manchurian Candidate. Angela Lansbury considered herself a proud socialist and came from a political family. Her grandfather, George Lansbury, was leader of the British Labour Party, who led the Poplar Rates Rebellion in 1921, a protest against unequal taxation in one of the poorest areas of London. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.